6 things highly spiritual people quit slowly. There is a kind of man whose feet still touch the earth, but whose heart has begun to ascend toward heaven. He is not perfect, yet he is marked by a holy dissatisfaction with the world, and a quiet resolve to be shaped by something greater than it. Such men and women are not made in a moment, nor do they sever ties with worldliness in a single act of zeal. No, they walk a narrow road, and as they walk, they quit things slowly, not because they are weak, but because God, in His wisdom, peels the soul layer by layer, pruning with patience, refining with fire. This is the path of the truly spiritual, not swift, but steady, not loud, but deep. The desire to be seen, there is no snare more subtle, no chain more gilded than the desire to be seen. It wears the garments of sincerity and walks with the gait of righteousness, yet its heart is poisoned with pride. In the early days of spiritual awakening, even the most earnest believer is not immune to it. Indeed, it often hides behind our loftiest deeds, behind our preaching, behind our praying, behind our sacrifices. We want to serve God, yes, but we also want men to see that we serve Him. The applause of heaven is craved, but often with one ear tuned toward the approval of earth. It is this dual desire, this divided loyalty, that the highly spiritual must confront. And they do not conquer it all at once. No, they quit it slowly, for it is a root that clings deep in the soil of self. In the earliest days of ministry or devotion, there is often an unconscious thirst for recognition. The young servant of God is eager to shine, not always for self-glory, but for proof that he is accepted, valuable, useful. He longs to hear others affirm his calling, to know that his labor is not in vain. And so he labors, not always in the strength of the Spirit, but sometimes in the strength of this hidden hunger. It begins subtly. He rejoices in the work, yes, but a part of that joy is fueled by compliments, social approval, visible fruit. The nod of man becomes a soft pillow. The praise of the crowd begins to sound like the voice of God, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he begins to perform for the crowd, even in the sacred things. But God, in His mercy, does not leave His children in such a state. He begins the holy work of loosening their grip on visibility. He brings them to the school of obscurity. The platform is lowered, the audience shrinks, the applause fades, and there, in the quiet places where no eyes are watching, God teaches them that He alone is enough. The highly spiritual do not rejoice in public platforms forever. They are weaned from them. They begin to crave the secret place, not the stage. They hunger for the smile of God, not the cheer of man. And yet this weaning is not instantaneous. They must be weaned like babes from the breast, slowly, painfully, but purposefully. There are times when the soul will cry out, "Does anyone see? Does anyone know the cost?" And heaven answers back, "I see, I know." This is enough for the spiritual man. He has learned through many tears and trials that obscurity with God is better than fame without Him. The hidden life becomes his treasure. He begins to understand that the greatest victories are won in prayer closets, not pulpits, that the most powerful sermons are often preached to no one but his own soul, and that the angels rejoice more over one act of faith done in secret than 1,000 done for show. This detachment from the desire to be seen is not a form of false humility. It is not the denial of gifts, nor the hatred of visibility itself. No, it is something richer. It is the realization that true spiritual power lies not in being known, but in knowing God. The spiritual man may still be visible, he may still lead, speak, write, but he no longer feeds on that visibility. It is no longer his lifeblood. He is content to decrease. He does not shrink from recognition when it comes, but neither does he seek it. His joy is full when Christ is magnified, even if he himself is forgotten, and herein lies a great paradox. Those who cease striving to be seen are often the ones God lifts in quiet authority. Their words carry weight because they are not self-seeking. Their lives bear fruit because they are rooted in hidden faithfulness. They are trustworthy because they have died to performance. God entrusts His secrets to them because they no longer trade truth for applause. The spiritual man is not afraid of being overlooked, for he knows that his Master sees in secret and rewards in eternity. Moreover, quitting the desire to be seen is not merely a personal sanctification, it is also a liberation. It frees one to truly love others, for when we are no longer competing for attention, we can celebrate the gifts of others without jealousy, we can serve in small places with great joy, we can lift others higher without fearing we'll be forgotten. The desire to be seen is a thief. It robs us of peace, of joy, of focus. But once it is crucified, we are made free to be vessels, unadorned perhaps, but wholly available to be filled and poured out by God. How tenderly the Lord dismantles this desire in His saints! He does not crush it in anger, but dismantles it in love. He allows misunderstanding. He permits obscurity. He hides His servants for a season, not as punishment, but as preparation. When God hides you, it is not rejection, it is refinement. It is in the hidden places where the roots grow deep. It is in the unseen places that character is carved. And when that character is full, He may bring His servant forth. But always, the one who has tasted intimacy with God never again craves the fickle praise of men. Beloved, if your soul still aches to be seen, do not despair. It is a journey. It is one of the things that the highly spiritual quit slowly. Ask the Lord to make you content in the shadows, to find your joy in His gaze alone. Say to Him, Lord, if no one ever sees me, let me be known in heaven. If no crowd ever claps, let the angels rejoice over my obedience. If I am never recognized, let it be enough that I recognize you. This prayer, whispered from a broken heart, is worth more than 1,000 sermons shouted from a stage. So let the world see less of you if it means seeing more of Christ. Let the need to be seen die if it means that Christ might live more fully in you. And when the last word is spoken and the final reward given, it will not matter how many knew your name, but only whether your name was written in the Lamb's book of life. The highly spiritual know this. And so, with every passing day, they let go, slowly, yes, but surely, of the desire to be seen. Bitterness and grudges, there is a venom that does not show in the blood, yet it poisons the soul. It is the quiet, corrosive power of bitterness, the slow, burning grudge that eats away at joy, patience, and peace. Many carry it silently, like a shard of glass buried under the skin, tolerated, justified, and even nursed. Yet it disfigures the inner life and clouds the light of God's presence. The highly spiritual do not escape the reach of bitterness by the strength of will alone. No, they must be led by the hand of God through the long, painful process of releasing offense over and over again. For bitterness is not laid down quickly. It is dismantled slowly, painfully, prayerfully, one memory at a time, one wound at a time, one release at a time. When first wronged, the soul recoils in pain, and rightly so. Justice is inscribed on the heart of man, and when we are sinned against, betrayed, slandered, abandoned, or mistreated, our instinct cries out for vindication. But the spiritual man soon learns that the cry for justice, when untamed by grace, turns to the poison of resentment. At first, the bitterness is justified. It is coated with righteous anger. They wronged me, we say. I have the right to feel this way. And perhaps we do, but what begins as injury soon becomes identity. We wear the wound. We rehearse it in our minds. We replay conversations, reimagine confrontations, and slowly allow the offense to take root, not just in our thoughts, but in our character. Bitterness is a root, and roots do not grow on the surface. They hide, they draw strength from the soil of pride and self-justification. They twist around every area of the heart until we no longer feel the pain of the offense. We become the offense. It defines our prayers. It drains our worship. It poisons our relationships. The highly spiritual are not immune to this process, but they are awakened to its danger. They begin to sense that the bitterness they harbor is not merely an emotional weight, it is a spiritual cancer. And so they begin the long work of release, not because they feel ready, but because they are called. But this releasing is slow. The grudge does not leave easily. It has built a home in the heart. It has justified itself for so long that to evict it feels like losing a part of oneself. And yet the Lord calls the spiritual man higher, to forgive even when there is no apology, to let go even when restitution has not been made, to bless those who curse, and to pray for those who persecute. Not once, not twice, but continually, and herein lies the agony. The spiritual man must forgive not only with his mouth, but with his memory. He must keep forgiving every time the wound resurfaces, every time the hurt is triggered. He must choose release again and again until freedom is complete. God is merciful in this process. He does not demand instant healing, but invites the soul to walk with him toward it. He whispers, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." And slowly the spiritual man begins to loosen his grip, not just on the offense, but on his right to carry it. He entrusts justice to the Lord. He lets God be the judge, and in doing so he begins to taste a strange, unfamiliar freedom, not the freedom of being right, but the freedom of being free. Free from resentment, free from the bitter taste in the mouth, free from the heavy burden of always needing the last word. This freedom is not cheap. It costs tears, prayer, and often many nights of wrestling. But oh, how sweet it becomes when the burden finally lifts. Bitterness must be quit slowly because it is tied to the most sensitive parts of our past. We do not simply forgive what was done to us. We must also grieve what we lost. Sometimes it is not the act itself that hurts the most, but the trust that was shattered, the innocence that was stolen, the years that were wasted. These cannot be recovered by human hands, and so the spiritual man takes them to God. He lays the ashes before the throne and waits for the one who gives beauty in return. He does not pretend the hurt never happened. He simply refuses to let it define who he is becoming. The most spiritual among us are not those who preach about forgiveness, but those who practice it daily. They are the ones who, when insulted, bless, when excluded, pray, when forgotten, rejoice, and this is not because they are strong, but because they are surrendered. They have discovered that unforgiveness is too expensive for a soul that longs to be filled with God. They choose peace even when pain is louder. They choose mercy even when memory burns, and in doing so they become living sermons of the cross, a place where undeserved forgiveness flowed down like blood. There is also this holy irony. Those who forgive most freely are often those who have been wounded the deepest. They have known betrayal, loss, injustice, and yet they reflect Christ most clearly, not because they avoided pain, but because they refused to let pain turn them into someone unrecognizable. In the hidden places of their soul, they've wrestled, cried, bled, and come out with the limp of grace. You see it in their eyes, that gentle strength, that peace that cannot be faked. They have no bitterness left to defend, only Christ to reveal. For the spiritual man, letting go of grudges is not a sign of weakness but of war, a war fought and won in secret. A war that says, I will not let this chain remain on me, no matter how justified it feels. They understand that God cannot pour living water into a bitter vessel. The spring must be sweetened, and that takes time. But the day does come when the soul no longer tightens at the name of the offender, no longer flinches at the memory. The peace of God fills the once burning place, and love, real love, takes the place of resentment. Beloved, if bitterness still clings, take heart. The highly spiritual quit it slowly, but they do quit it. not by pretending, not by suppressing, but by surrendering. They kneel in the secret place and say, Lord, I cannot let this go without you, but with you I can lay it down again and again, until my heart is clean. This is the cry of a holy life, this is the path to peace. And this is the mark of one who walks not just in faith, but in the fullness of grace. The love of comfort. There is no idol more politely dressed, more universally welcomed, and more fiercely defended than comfort. It does not storm the gates of the heart like lust or pride. It walks in with a smile, sets a cushion beneath the soul, and slowly lulls the spirit to sleep. The love of comfort is not born in wickedness, but in subtle preference. It wraps itself around the believer quietly, disguised as wisdom, balance, or self-care, but beneath its soft covering lies a deadly threat to the spiritual life. The highly spiritual do not begin their journey without it, they begin within it. But as the light of Christ burns brighter, this soft idol begins to melt, exposing its hollow core. They do not cast it off in a day, for comfort is not merely a state of ease, it is a way of thinking, a way of living. It must be unlearned slowly, surrendered steadily, crucified continually. In the early days of devotion, the soul delights in peace, stability, provision, the signs, as we suppose, of God's favor. And often, it is true, our Father does bless with good things. But what is first received with gratitude is often held too tightly over time. Comfort becomes a right, not a gift, and soon the heart is no longer willing to follow Christ if it means discomfort. A subtle negotiation begins to take place in the mind. Surely the Lord would not ask me to lose sleep, to give sacrificially, to stay in hard places, or to choose the narrow path when the wide one is available. And slowly we begin to fashion a Christ who only calls us into green pastures, never into valleys. But the highly spiritual man learns otherwise. God, in His mercy, begins to shake the nest. He calls the soul out from the soft cushions it has built for itself. He calls it into prayer that costs sleep, into service that requires sacrifice, into seasons of pain where comfort cannot be found in circumstances, only in Christ. The spiritual man learns that growth rarely comes when he is most at ease. It comes when he is stretched, refined, and emptied. He begins to see the false god comfort has become, not because comfort is evil, but because it has taken the place of obedience, and so, little by little, he begins to let it go. But oh, how slowly he lets it go, for the flesh clings to ease with desperate fingers. The spiritual man finds himself drawn to the familiar, the convenient, the predictable. He recoils at the command to take up his cross not once, but daily. Yet, as he draws near to Christ, he finds a deeper comfort, a comfort not based on surroundings but on presence. The Lord becomes his portion, not ease. The spiritual man learns, often through trial, that the path of comfort rarely leads to the cross, but the path of the cross always leads to glory. Slowly, painfully, he begins to trade the comfort of the body for the comfort of the soul. He watches as the Lord strips away his props, his routine, his income, his popularity, his plans. At first he protests. He mourns the loss of the security he once knew. But then he discovers the strange joy of being upheld by nothing but God. It is here, in this raw, trembling place, that the soul finally rests, not in the soft chair of circumstance, but in the strong arms of the Almighty. The highly spiritual are not fearless in these moments. They too weep, they too tremble, but they press in, because they have learned that obedience is better than comfort, and Christ is better than calm. In this journey, the Lord often calls His servants into uncomfortable obedience. He asks them to forgive when they would rather flee, to speak truth when silence would be easier, to endure when escape would be praised. And in these moments, the idol of comfort groans and begs for mercy. But the spiritual man, though slow, though hesitant, obeys. He obeys not because he enjoys discomfort, but because he knows where it leads. Every act of sacrificial obedience carves a deeper place for Christ to dwell. Every yes to God is a no to the self-life, and slowly the soul is transformed. There is a moment in the life of every saint when the Lord asks, "Will you follow me here?" And it is a place of cost. It may be a call to give up something precious, to stay where it is hard, to risk reputation, or to walk alone. And in that moment the old love for comfort rises like a wall. But the spiritual man knows this is the threshold. Here he must choose, not once, but continually. And though he may wrestle long and hard, he knows that Christ did not call him to a life of ease, but to a life of love. And love, if it is real, will always be costly. The spiritual man does not parade his discomfort. He does not speak often of his sacrifice. He simply walks the path appointed to him, eyes fixed on the Saviour who had no place to lay his head. He draws comfort not from circumstance, but from communion. He is content in lack, joyful in trial, and quietly steadfast when the world calls him foolish. He has tasted the depth of a peace that does not depend on pillows and predictable days, and having tasted it, he cannot go back. Indeed, this slow release of comfort is not a path to misery, but a path to maturity. The soul that has been weaned from ease is a dangerous soul, dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, dangerous to apathy, dangerous to the idols of this age. It is a soul that cannot be bribed, cannot be bought, cannot be silenced with threats of loss or suffering. Why? Because it has already surrendered. It has already let go. It has died to the craving for ease, and has found life in the fellowship of Christ's suffering. Beloved, if you still long for comfort more than calling, do not be discouraged. The highly spiritual quit this love slowly. It takes years, trials, and many small deaths, but it can be done, and must be done, if we are to carry the glory of Christ in this age. Say to the Lord, even trembling, "Take me out of ease if it means you'll bring me deeper into yourself." And then trust that whatever he removes, he will replace with something eternal. For when the soul is emptied of comfort, it is ready to be filled with power. And when we finally lose our grip on ease, we find our grip on God. The habit of hurry, there is a sickness of the soul that cannot be measured in heartbeats or diagnosed by physicians, yet it weakens every part of the inner life. It is the habit of hurry, a ceaseless, restless motion that hurries the hands, hurries the lips, hurries the mind, and worst of all, hurries the spirit. It is not mere busyness, for one can be busy and still be calm within. Hurry is deeper. It is a drivenness of the soul, a frantic resistance to stillness, a secret belief that worth is measured by pace and fruitfulness by speed, and it is killing the spiritual life of many. The highly spiritual do not begin free of this disease. In fact, many begin their walk with God full of ambition, movement, zeal, and activity. But over time, as they come to know the heart of God, they begin to quit these habits, lowly, painfully, and deliberately. They learn that God is not in the rush. He is in the stillness. He is not heard in the whirlwind, but in the whisper. The habit of hurry often disguises itself as holiness. The servant of God becomes addicted to doing, addicted to progress, addicted to the sensation of always being used. He feels holy when his schedule is full, when his phone never stops, when the results are visible. He equates movement with anointing. But underneath all the activity lies a subtle pride, the belief that God needs him, that the kingdom will suffer if he slows down, that stopping is the same as failing. And thus he runs, preaches, serves, plans, builds. Yet all the while, something inside begins to decay. The voice of God becomes faint. The presence of God becomes distant. The soul is busy, but it is no longer burning. It is only surviving. But God is too kind to let his servant live this way forever. He will not let his children run on fumes and call it fire, so he intervenes. He begins to slow them down, not out of punishment, but out of mercy. He allows circumstances to hinder their pace. He brings delays, closed doors, physical exhaustion, emotional burnout. At first, the spiritual man resists. He prays for renewed energy, new doors, fresh momentum. But in time, he begins to hear a different invitation: be still and know that I am God. And this invitation, at first unwelcome, becomes his salvation. He begins to realize that in all his doing, he has missed the better part: to sit at the feet of Jesus and simply be. Slowing down is not easy, for the habit of hurry is ingrained in the body and the mind. Even when the calendar is cleared, the soul still races. The spiritual man finds it difficult to rest. His prayers are rushed. His reading is distracted. His solitude is invaded by internal noise. But slowly he learns. Slowly he begins to embrace the sacred pace of heaven. He realizes that fruitfulness is not the result of frantic labor, but of abiding. He remembers that Jesus, though entrusted with the salvation of the world, was never in a hurry. He walked, he paused, he prayed all night, he delayed when others demanded, he lived unhurried, not because he lacked urgency, but because he was always aligned with the Father's timing. This unhurried life becomes the longing of the spiritual man. He wants to live not just for God, but with God, and that requires a different rhythm. He learns to pray long prayers not because he must, but because he wants to. He stops measuring devotion by the hour and begins measuring it by attention. He sets boundaries not just to manage time, but to protect presence. He no longer says yes to everything. He no longer chases every opportunity. He listens for the whisper, and that alone directs his steps. And in doing so, he begins to recover his soul. The habit of hurry also dies slowly because it is tied to identity. Many find worth in their usefulness, their productivity, their ministry reach. To slow down feels like failure. To be hidden feels like irrelevance. But the spiritual man begins to see that God is not building platforms. He is building people. And sometimes the most important work is not what God does through us, but what He does in us when we stop. It is in the stillness that pride is exposed, fears are confronted, wounds are healed. In the stillness, the voice of shame grows louder. But so does the voice of the shepherd who silences it with love. The spiritual man learns to endure stillness until he no longer fears it, and when he no longer fears it, he begins to love it. Even in ministry, the highly spiritual quit hurry. They no longer rush into sermons, into counseling, into leadership decisions. They wait, they listen, they fast and pray, they give God space to speak. They are willing to delay, even when pressure mounts, because they know that a moment of God's presence is more valuable than 1,000 rushed decisions. They begin to measure their days not by what was accomplished, but by whether Christ was encountered. And when this becomes the metric, their lives take on a calm, settled power. They walk slower, but they walk straighter. They do less, but they carry more authority. Their words are fewer, but they carry more weight. The unhurried soul is a holy soul. It is not passive, nor lazy, nor indifferent. It is focused. It is present. It is anchored. It has room for people, for interruptions, for real love. The spiritual man no longer walks past the wounded because he is rushing to a meeting. He no longer skips prayer because the next project looms. He no longer neglects his family because the ministry demands. He is free, not because his schedule is empty, but because his soul is full. He lives not from pressure, but from presence. Beloved, if your soul is still hurried, take courage. The highly spiritual do not quit this quickly. They fail often, they relapse into busyness, but they keep coming back to the feet of Jesus. They keep choosing the better part, and slowly the habit of hurry dies. It dies not because time changes, but because the heart changes. Say to the Lord, "Teach me to walk with you, not run ahead of you. Teach me to value your voice over the voices of demand. Teach me to find my rest in your pace, not the world's expectations." And in that prayer a new life begins, not fast but full, not loud but deep, not frantic but faithful. The craving for control. There is a deep, unseen grip in the soul of man, a craving not for gold, nor pleasure, nor even praise, but for control. It is a quiet thirst to manage outcomes, to shape circumstances, to secure safety by the strength of one's own understanding. It is not loud or boastful at first. Rather, it begins in the name of responsibility, maturity, wisdom. The man who seeks to follow God often does not realize how tightly he clings to the illusion of control until God begins to gently, yet persistently, pry his fingers open. For control is not merely a matter of strategy or stewardship. It is a condition of the heart, a disposition that says, I must know, I must secure, I must preserve. And yet the spiritual life begins, and only continues, when this craving is surrendered. The highly spiritual are not those who never desired control. They are those who, through fire and frustration, have learned to release it, slowly, deeply, painfully. Control masquerades as wisdom. It looks like planning ahead. It sounds like caution. It feels like maturity. But in truth it is often the fruit of fear. The fear of loss, the fear of failure, the fear of being undone. The spiritual man may begin his walk with tight plans and firm strategies, confident in his ability to chart a course. But as he draws near to the heart of God, he begins to encounter a strange and holy disruption. God does not move according to man's calculations. He interrupts, reroutes, delays, denies, and every interruption is not an obstacle, but an invitation to trust. But trust and control cannot live in the same house. One must go, and the spiritual man, though slowly, chooses to evict control. He chooses trust not because it feels safe, but because it is right. This surrender does not come all at once. It comes through deep wrestling, through unanswered prayers, through plans that fall apart. The spiritual man learns to sit in the discomfort of not knowing. He learns to worship in the dark. He learns to say, though he slay me, yet will I trust him, even when the slaying seems more real than the trusting. And in these sacred moments of loss and confusion, he is not abandoned. He is being refined. For God cannot build a truly spiritual man on the foundation of self-will. He must build him on the rock of surrender, and that rock is only exposed when the sand of control is washed away. The craving for control dies slowly because it is deeply rooted in self-protection. We want control because we fear pain. We want control because we have been wounded. We want control because the unknown is too terrifying to embrace. But the Lord, in His mercy, does not shame us for our fear. He meets us in it. He shows us time and again that His ways are not only higher, they are better. The spiritual man begins to look back and see that what he fought to preserve would have broken him, and what he feared to lose was actually the weight God needed to lift. And so, over time, he begins to release not just circumstances, but himself. He gives up his right to manage his image, to ensure outcomes, to avoid every cost. He begins to say, "Your will be done," and not as a phrase of resignation, but as a declaration of freedom. Letting go of control is not passive. It is not a folding of the hands or the abandonment of responsibility. No, the spiritual man is deeply engaged in life. He works, he plans, he decides, but he no longer demands. He no longer clings. He holds all things loosely, not carelessly. His grip is not weak, but surrendered. He does not panic when things fall apart, for he has learned that nothing held in God's hands is ever truly lost. This detachment does not make him indifferent, it makes him indestructible. He is no longer shaken by outcomes because his peace is no longer tied to them. Control also dies in the realm of relationships. The spiritual man must learn that he cannot change hearts, cannot force repentance, cannot manage the reactions of others, and this, perhaps, is one of the most painful deaths, the death of manipulation, even the subtle kind. He learns to speak truth and leave the results to God. He learns to pray rather than pressure, to intercede rather than interfere. He watches as people walk away, as doors close, as misunderstandings remain unresolved, and he trusts that God is working even when he cannot see it. This trust does not numb the heart, but anchors it. It allows him to love without strings, to serve without striving, to lead without control. Even in prayer, the spiritual man begins to notice a shift. He no longer comes to God only to ask for outcomes. He comes to yield. His prayers become less about requests and more about relationship. Father, not what I will, but what you will. And in that yielding he finds a strange power, not the power to control, but the power to endure, to wait, to hope. He learns that faith is not measured by how many answers he receives, but by how surrendered he remains when no answers come. He begins to walk in step with the Spirit, not dragging God into his plans, but being drawn into God's. This freedom from control also liberates the spiritual man from the crushing burden of self-dependence. He no longer sees himself as the master of his fate, the captain of his soul. He knows too much. He has seen how little control he truly has, and strangely, this does not leave him hopeless. It leaves him peaceful. He learns to rest in the sovereignty of God, not as a doctrine to defend, but as a pillow to lay his head upon. He begins to live in the flow of grace, trusting that whatever comes is from the hand of a wise and loving Father. He no longer needs to know the future because he knows the one who holds it. Beloved, if you find yourself still clutching the reins of your life, know that you are not alone. The highly spiritual have wrestled here. They have fought to maintain control, they have feared the surrender, but they have also discovered that in losing control they gained peace, in surrendering their plans they gained God's purposes. In quitting the craving for control, they found the freedom to truly live. Say to the Lord, even through trembling lips, I do not need to understand, I only need to trust. And watch how the peace of God, which passes understanding, will begin to guard your heart and mind, not because your world is managed, but because your soul is surrendered